It's a little past 7:30, so I think we will get started in our meeting tonight. This is our Green Team meeting. The Green Team meeting is the meeting of the Committee on the Environment and the City Council. This was put in place a number of years ago when we adopted the sustainability plan, and we had Gina Mathias come on as our sustainability manager. The purpose of the Green Team is to maintain and grow Tacoma Park's role as a sustainable community, and make sure that we put in place and we follow through on our sustainability action items. So we meet together at least once a year, and this is the second time we're meeting in this type of format. So in the past, it used to be members of the Green Team would come to a regular council meeting and sort of do a presentation from the podium, and there'd be a little bit back and forth. Last year, we changed things a bit to have this more discussion style, so that we could have a bit more back and forth and discussion regarding the Committee on the Environment's priorities and how they match up with the City Council priorities. And so thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. We thought we would first start, because I know the Committee on the Environment has some new members, and we have some new council members. So why don't we start with introductions and go around the room? We can start over here.
My name is Jeff Brokaw.
Jeff, okay.
Ward 2.
I'm Kirsten State. I'm in Ward 4.
John Ackerley, Ward 2. I share the same power lines as
Oh.
Cindy.
Our sympathies. Oh, yeah. If you want to, when you speak, if you could push the buttons on the microphones. Yeah.
Sharon Cohen, Ward 3.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Satjeevan Ikle Khalsa, Ward 2, and co-chair. Looking for another co-chair.
Yeah.
I'm Suzanne Ludlow, City Manager.
I'm Cindy DeBella, Council Member, Ward 2.
Kate Stewart, Mayor.
Terry Siemens, Ward 4.
Talisha Searcy, Ward 6.
Casey Kostick, Ward 3.
Jason Danweber, Deputy City Manager.
Daryl Braithwaite, Public Works Director.
Gina Mathias, Sustainability Manager.
Marty Ittner, Ward 5.
Jeff Short, Ward 4.
Paul Krastowski, Ward 1.
Helen Gelband, Ward 3.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So we have an agenda this evening. I think everyone should have a copy of it. The purpose of our meeting is, as I said before, is to discuss updating the joint Green Team priorities and to identify specific areas in which the Committee on the Environment can help the City Council. And tonight, the recommended Green Team actions are approve or revise the updated Green Team priorities and identify 2 to 3 specific shared areas for joint action. And so our first item up this evening is to turn it over to our sustainability manager to give us an update on sustainability and other environmental efforts by the city in the past year.
Great. Thank you, Kate. The Green Team's purpose fulfills our need for one of the requirements of being Sustainable Maryland certified. We have to convene this meeting. And in 2017 in October, we were recertified. This is our second time earning Sustainable Maryland certification. And we were named Sustainability Champion of the Year, which is great, with 650 points, which is, from my recollection, at least 150 points more than the next community down from us. So we did outstanding, and in your packet of information is an outline of all of the actions we earned points for and how many points we earned in that category. And I attempted to align it with the draft priority areas for the Green Team. And it can serve as a good foundation for the conversation of what priority areas the Green Team is interested in pursuing over the next year. And tell you what actions have already been taken and what needs to be done further or where we can take some more action. I'm going to focus primarily on our big point items to highlight for you. I generally specialize in energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reductions for the city, and Daryl Braithwaite, the Director of Public Works, can talk about stormwater programs and other sustainability-related programs as questions come up. So first, we earned a lot of our points in innovative demonstration projects. That means we did something above and beyond what Sustainable Maryland would consider a normal sustainability-related action. We earned points for our Neighborhood Energy Challenge and our Car Free Challenge. And I'll take a step back. This is over a 3-year period, so this is not just the past year, it's the past 3 years of sustainability actions that earned our certification. Our biggest point item came in energy efficiency, not surprising, for innovative demonstration projects that covered our solar co-op participation and increasing solar installations citywide, our LED streetlight pilot projects and conversions, the solar crosswalk light pilot project, purchasing Windrex to cover more than 100% of city operations, and the solar that is on this building and Public Works. So that earned us 50 points. We earned points for upgrades we've made to city facilities, including Hefner Park, this building, and the Recreation Center. We earned points for the Neighborhood Energy Challenge in several different categories, including residential energy efficiency, innovative projects, and several other further down the list. The Georgetown University Energy Prize earned us 20 points, again for innovative demonstration projects. We've already completed our greenhouse gas inventory. We've done it several times. This year we're doing an update, but it did earn us 15 points for having a community-wide inventory as well as a municipal footprint. They gave us points for doing both. So that's 30 points combined. We earned a lot of points in health and wellness, which is not exactly greenhouse gas emission reductions, but it's still sustainability, especially when we look at our new Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center gym and the bikes that we've installed throughout the city for residents and for staff. So the bike share expansion and pilot projects have earned us a lot of points for this project, or for Sustainable Maryland. Our curbside composting, the Kilowatt Smackdown, small business energy efficiency competition, and the county green business certification, since we have a couple of local businesses certified, all earned us points. And I'm going to skip down past some of these because I think we're all very familiar with a lot of our ordinances and laws in the city regarding purchasing and recycling. Our Safe Grow law, yard waste collection and mulch, and the urban forestry program earned us points in the natural resources category. And lastly, I want to highlight all of the points we earned for planning and land use. I think it's great that the Ethan Allen Gateway Streetscape project and the Flower Avenue project earned us 30 points in land use for innovative demonstration projects. That is a really broad overview. We earned 650 points, so there is a lot of detail that I skipped over for your benefit. But if anybody wants the detail, I have the full report here. This is what I submitted to Sustainable Maryland Certified. So if you'd like a copy, you can grab one after the meeting, or I can pass them around to you now. Also in your packet is the sustainability-related budget items. This is, again, just a select snapshot of what we are spending on sustainability in the city, specifically energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction strategies, and stormwater, and food waste, and our urban tree canopy program. You'll see in fiscal year 18, we budgeted $15,000 for interns to assist in outreach, public education, and general administrative support to public works staff. And we plan to increase that just slightly for fiscal year 19. I plan to use interns for public outreach in the 100% renewable energy campaign we'll be launching, and the new challenge that will kick off in fiscal year 19, whatever that happens to be. The stormwater management project budget is also seeing a slight increase, and I will let Daryl go over stormwater in just one moment and what programs that will entail. The plantings for the bulk buy, or the budget for the bulk buy, will stay the same, as will curbside food waste collection program. And our special events program is going to stay the same for next year. The budget for energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reduction strategies is the same, but money is being moved slightly to adjust for new programming interests and to satisfy the needs that we see in the community. We had a lot of money in the budget for fiscal year 18 for low income to moderate income energy efficiency projects for single family homeowners to match a grant we earned from the Maryland Energy Administration. We earned a $90,000 grant, and from prior years' experience, we learned that in order to qualify homeowners for that grant money, we had to put some money up from the city to cover safety and health and wellness issues inside the home, and to cover things that the strict parameters of the Maryland Energy Administration wouldn't allow. Doing that helped us qualify. Everyone who applied could participate this year. The first year we earned the grant, only 50% of the homes could participate. So that worked out really well. We completed all of the homes. Tomorrow is our compliance monitoring visit, and we'll close out the grant for this cycle. Next year, we're going to shift focus heavily to multifamily energy efficiency. This is a big need in the city, is to help our multifamily buildings improve living conditions, have a higher quality of life for the people living in the buildings, and also control their utility expenses. They're outrageous. The buildings are old and in need of improvements, and that will have a big impact on our greenhouse gas inventory. So that is where you see a big budget shift for next year in those programs. Do we have any questions based on all of that?
So this is fiscal 19 proposed?
Yes, proposed.
Gina, thank you. Sorry I was late. How much money can you remind us that the city put in for the, matching funds for the single-family homes, energy efficiency?
It was $42,000 total.
Okay. And some buildings have third parties that collect the utility payments. They do the billing. How would you suggest that we could work with them to make utilities more efficient? If it's not going through directly the landlord, it's going through a third party.
We'll have to work with the third party too, I think, in that case.
Okay. And Essex House has a situation. They're using a firm called Studebaker, and it's just been one problem after another.
Yeah, we can look at their contract terms, if it's time for them to go out to bid for a new contract, see what options they have.
Because there may be firms that, have a mission statement or priorities in, energy efficiency. I think that might be a better route than going, just collecting money and pretending you're a utility, but you aren't actually a utility.
But yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. Gina, could you say a little bit more about the climate resiliency plan?
Yes, so that is a requirement for the Compact of Mayors, which is now the Global Covenant of Mayors that we signed, the mayor signed in 2015, I believe. That was signed, and it's a requirement that the city has a resiliency risk hazard plan, a risk hazard map, and a climate resiliency plan. And the $5,000 is for a preliminary plan. I believe a full-scale resiliency plan will be a large undertaking, similar to what the Sustainable Energy Action Plan was. So this budget item is meant to satisfy the covenant before going into a large-scale planning process.
Great. We can continue.
Daryl, do you want to talk about stormwater?
Sure. I think there's a couple other items that you have that were attached to the budget. I know that there's interest in the kind of solid waste management programs of the city, so there was a chart that just compared past few years of trash and recycling and yard waste programs. The city operates its own collection service for single-family homes and small apartment buildings. We pick up from about 3,800 households in the city. Things have remained fairly constant over the past few years in terms of the percentage of waste that we pick up and dispose in various ways. A little less than half is trash. A little more than half is compost or recycling or yard waste programs. There's been slight increases as the participation in the food waste program, which was started 3 years ago now, has kicked off. As with most new programs, what we found years ago when we started the recycling program, nothing different in the food waste program, is your processing facilities and capability is key, and that really drives the rest of the program. So your end user, who's going to handle it and manage it, enables you to establish a program, first of all. And we can't really grow our program more. We haven't taken a more aggressive and promotional kind of approach yet with food waste because we're still limited to the amount of tonnage that we can take to where we currently take it, which is the Prince George's County compost facility run by the Maryland Energy Service. They have indicated that they're planning an expansion, so we're hopeful that situation will resolve itself in the not too distant future. At this point, we're capped at a certain tonnage per week, so we fit within that 4 tons a week, but it's limited our ability to expand it beyond. So right now we're sort of in a holding pattern. It's a very successful program. It's really, people love it, those that participate in it, but we really haven't done the door knock and push out the program yet until our processing capacity is nailed down. And one of the things you'll see, people that watch the stuff really intimately, our waste stream is changing. Any of you that could think back 10 years ago, there's just not that many glass bottles in the trash anymore unless it's wine bottles, or liquor bottles. The sodas and the food products are really coming in more and more plastic, paper, and metal cans. The plus part of that is the lightness and weight. Both for manufacturing, shipping, and their sales, but also on our end, it sometimes skews the numbers, so it looks like our recycling numbers are going down, but it probably is more a reflection of the changing types of containers that are in the marketplace and being used. But you'll see on that chart, the numbers have stayed fairly consistent. We have a popular program with very high participation rates. The participation rates of these programs in the city are higher than most jurisdictions because of the interest I think people have in the programs and the support of the programs. So those programs just carry on. The other piece of information that I brought, and it gets a little bit more into the weeds, is the stormwater information. And there's a couple of documents that I'll refer you to. One is the upcoming next year stormwater request.
Before we leave waste, can I ask a question about
Sure.
participation rates in food waste program? Is it about a quarter of the residents, 10% of the residents?
It just about half. We're
excuse me.
about 1,600 households participating of the 3,800 households we service. A little less than half.
And can I just...
There are some multifamily that do, but it's the smaller multifamily buildings, and it's really motivated folks that do so.
And I had a follow-up question on that, too. I know these are the numbers for the past 3 years when we had the food waste collection, but did we see a substantial decrease in trash with the increase in the food waste?
Just that portion that you see now as food waste used to be picked up
exactly.
as trash. Yeah. So it tracked, pretty consistently. Okay. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to make sure to say on our solid waste programs.
Is there any estimate at all that you would want to repeat about when a new facility might come online?
You know, I haven't had a conversation with the Prince George's County staff for quite a while, so I don't know where they are in it. We signed a letter of interest and intent saying that if you build it, we will come. And that was probably a year or more ago. So I don't know where they are in the process, but we can look. We can certainly reach out to them and find out if things are still on track at the county facility. In terms of stormwater management, again, we have a stormwater management page on the city's website, which is probably, if you want detailed information, a good place to go if you really want to get down into the details. The kind of information I brought, I thought would just be helpful for sort of painting a picture. The biggest change in our programs is last year the council approved a rate increase, and we did a presentation that basically spelled out what those funds were needed for, and it's driven by a number of factors, one of which is our mandate by the federal government and state government to meet certain pollution reduction requirements related to stormwater management, and so we are well on our way to working on that. But I think what we saw after, I think we've been really focused on this since 2004, really, but not creating the bioretention facilities and the infiltration facilities. Those have come online in the last, say, 5 or 6 years. And so what we've been able to take away from that is that at our current rate, prior to the rate increase, we weren't going to meet the mandated requirements for treatment capacity, and that's for a program like ours that is, I mean, I wouldn't say mature. We're not in the baby phase. We're probably in the teenage years. You know, we've had a bunch of years at it. We have some experience at it, and so we've been, identifying ways that we find more success in terms of getting pollution removal credits through the program. But it's a pretty aggressive program. We need to treat 20% of the areas that currently don't receive stormwater treatment. So basically that's 20% of your impervious areas need to have a form of stormwater capture and pollution removal to meet the requirements. And for us, that's basically the equivalent of treating 97 acres, I believe, of impervious area. So that information in more detail is again on the website. The presentation that we put forward to the council last year is a pretty informative way of kind of tracking where we are and where we're going or where we think we'd like to go. The other information I included here was just our next year's budget request, which tracks pretty similarly with last year's. There are capital projects as well as just our overall personnel costs and maintenance and services costs that we do, some of which we're required to do, like water quality testing. Others of it we have been doing for quite a while, just for best management practices, is the video inspection of our lines so that we know what's going on underground and can identify problems before they happen or identify problems that have already happened that we need to fix. So that page just kind of lays out, and again, this is council approval, so this is, you're just seeing the presentation that we're going to be put together. It may change once the budget is approved by the council, but it basically shows you a starting point. The other thing that I brought along is sort of our 5-year plan, actually it might even be 6-year plan for both capital projects as well as major system repairs and improvement. So you can kind of see what we're planning. The purpose of this is just to identify the project as well as identify what treatment credit we think we're going to get from those projects. So that's the information. That's sort of more the spreadsheet format that was included in the attachments to this agenda item. So that's pretty much all I had to say. There's a couple of things I wanted to point out. We had intended to have a rate study structure, and we'll be coming to you Wednesday night, we put out an RFP. And so we are making a recommendation for a contract award for the company to come in. And basically, we haven't evaluated our impervious area since CH2M Hill established it for the city's stormwater utility fee when it was created. So basically, back then, they were using aerial maps and they were using tax records. And, you know, the work was good at the time, but now we have much more sophisticated tools to use, including LIDAR and other types of information to take a look again at what our average impervious area is for single-family homes, and then also use that to create the base rate that we use to charge commercial and institutional facilities based on their impervious area. So they'll be evaluating the actual impervious area for single-family homes, using both technology, GIS, aerial maps, LIDAR, as well as doing some field reality testing of about 200 homes just to capture that information. So that'll be giving us a kind of a refreshed look at our base unit and our impervious area assumptions about the single-family homes. And then the proposal that we received also has the capacity for some add-on studies if we choose to do so, things like credit programs, developing a credit program, which I know is an interest that we've heard about for years, as well as looking at a tiered rate structure to see if we've got enough difference in the average single-family home analysis to warrant a tiered structure for single-family residents. So that's going to be upcoming, and we hope to have that study done. I can't remember now how many weeks, but 7 or 8. So once we get the council approval, then we'll move forward on that. We're anxious to see that. It's been a long time coming, so we're hopeful to get that information.
Great. Any questions? Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Daryl. Can you give us on the capital improvement program that you have, can you give us a little preview for the Ward 5 projects, the one on Kennebec and Houston Avenue?
In which year?
Kennebec is FY20 and Houston is
sure.
FY23.
Well, again, kind of learning curve. One of the things when we first started out, we were creating infiltration basins and bioretention facilities, those planted garden areas. We have I think we have 53 currently in the city. We have also been exploring, and the county is kind of ahead of us on this, a product. You know, there's a variety of different manufacturers, but one that's called Filterra, which is basically looks kind of like a stormwater inlet with a tree growing out of it. And they tend to have, they're more cost effective in terms of treatment credit for stormwater management. And they have some ability to better manage and control the first flush, which is the type of most polluted water that you're trying to get, and focus it into the medium where it can do the filtration. So Kennebec Avenue was identified as a quite a bit of impervious area where one of the things that we're doing with the Flower Avenue Green Street project is we're creating stormwater infrastructure there, but we also realize that all those streets slope down to Sligo Creek Parkway. So over the past as well as up here in the future, we're looking to focus on those areas adjacent to Long Branch and Sligo Creek so we can treat the stormwater that's flowing directly from our streets into the stream there. So the Kennebec Avenue is a proposed couple of filteras which will capture stormwater right along the existing infrastructure. So basically an inlet will be expanded and there'll be a filtera added to provide treatment so it won't change the current functioning of the stormwater. It'll basically be using the existing infrastructure but trying to treat and capture some before it goes out into the creek. And let's see, where else have I got?
Houston.
Houston would be the same kind of thing. We have had a couple of facilities on Roanoke. We've got facilities on Wabash. So this is just adding to those. So the Houston Avenue would be, again, a similar type of proposal where we would be using filtera or capture facilities to treat.
And so do you anticipate these facilities to be mid-block of Kennebec and at the end of the Kennebec? So
They probably, they will be located near just existing inlets. So wherever they are, we go beside them with the Filterra units.
Okay, all right. And one other question. With the rate increase in the stormwater management fee, does that keep us as a leader in stormwater management in Montgomery County and the state?
Well, in terms of the rate structure, what we were recently informed is that we're kind of on the low end of stormwater rates currently. So, for instance, City of Rockville has a much higher stormwater rate than us. One of the companies that we hope to award the contract to for our impervious area does a nationwide stormwater rate study, and so we'll be getting their most recent study to sort of see where we fit in the midst of stormwater utilities. So, you know, every jurisdiction is trying to reach that 20% goal, so we're all hunkered down and moving forward. And one of the things, you know, depending on where you are and what your topography is and what your land is, I mean, for areas like Tacoma Park that are pretty well built out, we don't have some of the low-hanging fruit that other jurisdictions have. One of the things that you'll find when meeting with our peers and other cities and park and planning is they're really focused on stream restoration, which is a great thing because it gives you quite a bit of credit for stormwater treatment. We don't have that many stream channels in Tacoma Park that aren't owned by Park and Planning, so Park and Planning says, thank you very much. We'll do our stream restoration and get the credit. If you guys want to do one of your little tributaries, that's cool. But we are also working with Park and Planning on a major project at Tacoma Branch. So we're very hopeful for that, and we're just in the development stages now. It is there are a couple areas where we have storm channels that are basically streams. Circle Woods is one, behind Baltimore Avenue is another, and Tacoma Branch down in the Sligo Mill, Poplar Mill area, just to the west of New Hampshire Avenue is the third.
All right, thank you.
Great. Any committee on the environment members? Yeah.
This very detailed plan stretches out for many years. Is there any sense in trying to front end any of this by accessing some funding ahead of time?
Well, our biggest issue is staff capacity. So this program that we've laid out is very aggressive, just in terms of our own ability to manage the projects and keep them moving, both the design element as well as the construction element. So we are pedaling as fast as we can. If we were to front end something, we would have to have the management and construction oversight and project development piece of it as well. It would almost be like we'd have to contract with a design build type of arrangement where they could develop the design, oversee the construction, and basically hand you the keys at the end. We haven't looked into that in terms of companies available to do that. Certainly something we can look at.
So no overtime for Ali and early retirement?
Yeah. I mean, the construction manager and the city engineer don't get overtime. So,
I'm just thinking that, you know, it's
they're
all laid out.
salaried positions.
We're just delaying the time that we get the benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a very good point. You know, we, for instance, at Tacoma Branch project, we've been trying to get that off the ground for 5 years or so. Some of it was the big cost implications. We've been farming around for grant money for several years. Nima Upade and my staff has been quite successful at capturing grant money for projects, but has been unable to get this one going because we need to have the design developed first. So we're hopeful that we can get some grant funding for that project, but it's a bit of a chicken-egg thing.
All right. Well, seeing no other questions, thank you for the presentation. And now we're going to talk about, I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Dabala to provide the City Council perspectives on environmental sustainability within our current priorities. And I should note, actually, before Councilwoman Dabala goes, is that I think in the future, our ideal thing would be to meet as a green team before the council retreats in January, before we have the priorities, but given the elections, that was difficult to do. So just to give that context.
Yeah, given that three of us wouldn't have been sitting here. But never mind that. So what I want to do is since the point of this meeting is to talk about the overarching environmental priorities, I want to talk about what we've got, what this council has got down now for this next year or two, and compare it a little bit to what the previous council had. So just to put it in context, the council has 5 overriding goals, and 3 of them have to do with community, 2 with government. The 3 that have to do with community, environmental sustainability is one of them, a livable community, and community development are the 3 community-based goals. So right away, depending on your point of view, environmental sustainability is in the mix for sure. And then last year, within that, the City Council had three goals under environmental sustainability: energy efficiency, renewable energy, and tree canopy. And to make a very long and wonderful presentation on results short, the city did pretty well in moving forward on energy efficiency and renewables, and for a whole bunch of reasons, not as much progress on tree canopy. So, enter this year, and what this group's proposed to do is to collapse the energy and renewables goals into community sustainability, and then to also have the tree canopy goal once again. So it looks like this. Everybody has this. And then within that, there are some strategies proposed. So within the continuing to be a leader in community sustainability, we have 3 strategies. The first one's on energy efficiency with a focus, as Gina said, on multifamily. The second is on renewable energy with a focus on solar and wind, as Gina said. And the third one is looking at how environmental sustainability will intersect with the work that the council is going to do on housing and economic development this year. Come to the tree canopy. Looks a lot like last year. Tree canopy goal, reviewing the tree ordinance to make it more user friendly, and at the same time not to affect tree canopy health adversely. And that's reflected in another section of the plan, which is the engaged government section. We're looking at 3 processes that the city has for sidewalk, for traffic calming, and for trees, and what in all 3 of those can be done to make them more user-friendly and to make them better for the city and the residents to walk through. I want to point out one other thing before we open it up, and that is just that there's a fairly long list of existing projects and initiatives, ongoing activities as part of this. So what we thought was, rather than repeat things that are obviously priorities because we've been working on them already, we just had them listed like, yes, of course, this city is going to continue to work on meeting its stormwater permitting requirement, et cetera. So we didn't reflect them in the goals. The goals are like on top of that. So having said all that, I think I'm done for now. Questions, comments?
Terrific. Yeah, Paul.
Well, of course, I'm glad to hear that we're moving forward on tree canopies, because as you know, Cindy, I've been pushing this for close to 10 years at this point. Really would like to see something get done. And I know that Public Works has commissioned a new study on the canopy, so we're all anxiously awaiting the results of that study. I would also like to throw out, though, I think that there's something else that we might want to consider in this one. I know you can't do these priorities are done, but as we move forward, we have 3 extremely large development projects that are either occurring or will occur in the city. And of course, that's the city-owned lot at the junction, it's Montgomery College, and it's whatever is going to happen to WAP. All of these things are likely to have major environmental impacts. And I'm not talking about the impacts after something is established. We recognize that, for example, the developer at the junction is proposing LEED Gold certification. That's going to be fairly green. But during the construction process of all these, we're going to have a lot of environmental impacts. These will be stormwater, things we've already talked about today. Stormwater, these will be greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution, noise pollution, et cetera. And I would like the council and the committee, I'm being off the committee after June because of term limits, but the rest of you here, to consider doing something about looking at the environmental impacts of these development projects and ensuring that there are no mitigatable impacts that we're allowing to occur in these three projects.
Great. Any other comments or thoughts?
Since Paul raised this issue, I just wanted to, since we've got a group of interested people here involved in this issue, we had gotten a proposal from Jarlath, I can't remember his last name, to do the evaluation of tree canopy using the LIDAR data. We've had several LIDAR runs ourselves over time, 2009, 2014, and working out the details with him. The last, I think 2 weeks ago, we found out that either the state or Park and Planning is planning a new LIDAR data, like the latest, greatest data that will be available in June. And so our plan was to get Jarlath going in, actually it was February and March, and then we hope to have a community seminar in April where we had him there and everybody interested to talk about the data and then work with us to kind of come up with a tree canopy goal based on what his findings were and the historical information that he was going to be comparing. He strongly recommends that we wait till we get the June data. I guess as data heads go, more data, better data, newer data. So we've sort of sat back, and now it appears that we're going to take that recommendation and delay the tree canopy analysis until I believe it's Park and Planning completes their work. So we're hoping early June that data would be available, which would then make his part like a July, August with a September focus for a community discussion on the results and the tree canopy recommendations for that. So since you'd raised it, I just wanted to let people know that we're likely to delay that until the fall instead of the spring.
Councilmember Siemens?
Daryl, are we sure that the county is going to include Tacoma Park in their study?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We've gotten confirmation from the folks that are paying for the work. Mm-hmm.
Good question.
Yeah.
They did in the last one, Councilman Siemens. The county commissioned that, and we were in it, and they had a very nice word-by-word breakdown that we could use. And I think you may recall last year I discussed with you the discrepancy between our wards. Some wards do not have the advantage of a good tree canopy. Other wards have a lot of canopy. I think the important thing, Daryl, I'm glad. I hope this is finally going to get resolved. Because we are really in need of a metric that we can measure our canopy against. And I hope that, I'm glad that you're continuing to speak with him. I've spoken with him myself. I know he's the guru of us all in tree canopy. So we defer to his judgment certainly on this. But as you recall, the past two studies used different LIDAR resolutions. And I think what we need is something where we can compare to the previous studies. And I know that some members of the Tree Commission and other interested parties have been concerned about differentiating between a so-called canopy tree as it's defined in our ordinance and the overall concept of tree canopy, which can include understory trees. So if we can make both of those kind of differentiations in this, I think that would be very useful. But thanks for doing all this.
John?
Yeah, this is a question for you, Kate, but the whole council. To what extent is the council interested in setting more specific guidelines for greenhouse gas reductions, like a lot of cities have? A lot of cities have a goal of a 50% reduction by a certain date or even 100%. And Kate, I know you signed on to that One Sierra Club thing, which is, I think, 100%.
Yeah.
But in a lot of those towns and cities are going through a real planning process to get there and making sure you're meeting deadlines. So I'm wondering if that's something that this council is interested in doing, is really setting targets and developing a plan to meet them.
Great. John, I would say from my perspective, that comes in the discussion later between the Committee on the Environment and the Council. Because I would also like to hear, given the other priorities that the Committee on the Environment has put forward, what your all recommendation is vis-a-vis the other priorities we've had put forward so far. Like, you're correct that I did talk to the city staff before we signed on to the Sierra Club. It was a compact, I lose track of what everyone calls these different things, pledge, and it was in line with what we are currently doing. But if we want to put that as a priority, I think that would be a conversation that we would have with the Committee on the Environment and the city staff to say that is going to be one of our priorities, because I do think then that in terms of what the Committee on the Environment's working on and what the city staff capacity is, that's the conversation we have to have.
Yeah, very much. And I know Gina's already doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this with the RFP for wind power, so that homes and businesses can sign up, which is like a big chunk of it. And I think Peter is very interested in this too, and I know he's down here tonight.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. And the point of the discussion period is to discuss this, but I'll just say that from my perspective, as I understand it, what we've been doing is we had the Sustainable Energy Action Plan, which has things you're supposed to do, but and that has an implied percentage reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. But as far as setting a target in the way that you're talking about, we haven't done it. We've been sort of working by reference, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, Gina?
I can confirm that's correct. In the Sustainable Energy Action Plan, the city states that it supports the regional reduction goals, the state reduction goals, and the county reduction goals, which are all worded slightly differently. But the city chose to not set a specific target, but rather to support and to do everything we can. The plan also does not set out specific target years or benchmarking years. I was thinking that coming up in fiscal year 19, it is time for us to update the Sustainable Energy Action Plan, because we have made tremendous progress. So it may be a good time to look at that.
And I just want to go back to something Paul said, that the council priorities have not been adopted yet, actually, by the city council. And we wanted to make sure that we got this meeting in before they were adopted. So if we want to have that conversation of, doing that, that's exactly why we're here tonight. So, but I guess maybe unless there's something specific about what has currently been put forward as the city council priorities, then we're going to move to a review of the previous Green Team priorities. And then we'll open it up for conversation. Yep. All right. The chair of the Committee on the Environment.
Co-chair.
Co-chair.
I'm having a little shoulder and back issues today, so if I do this, I'm not asking to speak anymore. So we've got 30 minutes here, and I only provided a one-page summary, which I have more details here, just as Gina also provided more details if we need. I'm happy to see a lot of consensus already. I was pretty much going to skip to the bottom of this document here and review the current proposed list. There are a couple notes on it, which I think we're already going to try to change. And I mostly want to recognize that coming out of the council retreat and priorities, we pretty much have the first tier covered and haven't spoken much to any of the other ones. And that's pretty much how I think it should be in terms of being sure not to just say we want to do everything on everything. we have existing programs that do waste management and stormwater management. But I do want to acknowledge anything that is down on the list and make sure that we're okay with it staying there. The biggest thing that maybe it's not even listed here is Paul's comment that development projects are not very specifically addressed. They could be subsumed under any of those other categories. But from a perspective of now is the time when money is being spent and infrastructure is being built, you want to focus on that a little more specifically as it's happening or right before it's happening, as opposed to trying to address it after. So we'll go down here. As Gina and others have mentioned, the energy efficiency program is kind of morphing from the single-family focus, even though that will still be continued as an ongoing program, into the more multifamily and or commercial and municipal efforts. I'm going to just say them quickly and pause a little bit in case there's some questions or thoughts on each one. I don't know if I have more details to say about each one unless people want to ask about it. We've kind of covered a lot of these already. For renewable energy, we've got an exciting new campaign to engage people to voluntarily sign up for renewable energy and their home energy bills, along with some other new state programs around solar farms and people who can figure out how to do renewable energy even if their house is not suited for it, or their apartment building, or the tree canopy above their house doesn't work. I'm excited that it feels like that priority is already in action and we'll have a strong focus for the next year. So urban tree canopy, that's the first kind of change from what was proposed here. We'd kind of been talking about it moving down and somewhat needing to take a lower priority since that's how it's been happening the past year, but acknowledging that we had a new urban forest manager hired, and then we have this new county LIDAR data coming, and that it's a affirmed strategy from the council retreat to keep the tree canopy as a high priority. I'm going to rescind or propose that we rescind this idea to move it down. There's also the idea of putting in the ordinance update, which I think will be probably a good practice and timely thing to happen, but will cause headaches and large meetings with lots of comments, and just something to be aware of that priority will take a lot of effort.
We appreciate that awareness.
So I'm going to pause there to see if there's any comments on the first tier priorities before moving down the list. So for second tier priorities, I see, and Daryl can speak more to this, waste management is fairly well established and pretty steady and has some goals waiting for other facilities to open up and opportunities to present themselves. And we haven't, as a council or as a committee, kind of tried to push that we want to set new goals or get 75% alternative waste diversion or anything like that. So there are some ideas about reducing smaller campaigns, getting restaurants to stop using plastic straws, and some citizen efforts have come a little bit to the committee, but we haven't done a lot of our own effort on them to help with the styrofoam adoption and other projects. I don't have anything else to say about the waste management now. Yes.
Something I wanted to raise was that our trash now is currently going to landfills, as I understand it. The council and members of the committee should be aware of the fact that landfills are responsible for greater amounts of greenhouse gas generation than other methods of trash disposal, such as waste energy facilities. And I would think that this might be something to look into in the future if we are going to adopt greenhouse gas reduction goals. we need to look at more than energy sources. We need to look at other causes of greenhouse gases, such as our waste management. I recognize from Darrell that there is a cost benefit here, and far be it from me to say we should spend extra money, but it's something in the council's purview to weigh these types of things.
Yeah, and I echo your comments, Paul. I think it's a very good thing to take a look at and keep in our mind. We really have largely been driven on an economic analysis basis. You know, less tip fee, lower tip fee. You know, saving the city money. How far away is the facility? How long does it take us to drive there? So there's some greenhouse gas implications on either side. The other piece that I just want to throw out, if the city were to really want to get into waste management, in my opinion, the vehicle to get you there is to look at our fee structure for trash collection. And if you really want to motivate and change behavior, looking at they call it pay-as-you-throw or pay type arrangements where you pay based on the amount of trash you generate. We'd raised this issue over a decade ago with the council, and Montgomery County was looking to do a pilot program back then. It just became a little politically difficult because there are other issues that you raise, as with anything. The impact on larger families or multi-generational families within a house. So you have to kind of weigh, again, everything's got sort of...
An increase in illegal dumping is another big one.
Yeah, that tends to be more of a fear than an actual reality. For the most part, people are, law-abiding citizens, but it could certainly happen. But anyway, I just want to put it out there. If you really want to look at waste management, the communities that have taken this on tend to have a, different size can approach and different rate structure for the amount of trash that you generate.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that some businesses are working towards a zero trash, and I wondered if the committee had looked at any ideas on maybe advocating for programs with our businesses in that direction.
I'll say it's probably taken a third-tier priority in our own actions. A lot of the committee's work is either driven by a council request, citizen request, or our own internal motivation, and it has not come up strongly. I think some members have an interest in waste management and zero waste, but we have not addressed it formally.
Thank you. So for purposes of tonight, the question is whether all or part of these waste management questions should rise a little higher. Is that, or sink a little lower, as the case may be, on the priority list?
Yeah, I think okay.
It might be useful to straw vote with everybody in the room. Raise up or raise down or keep the same.
I think the last time we met, the way we did it was after you went through all of them, to then kind of, so that we're not voting on something before you are able to discuss something else,
sure,
if that makes sense, because somebody may decide later on something else is more interesting to them and they wouldn't have voted the same way if they had to. So I think why don't we step through all of it and then we can go back.
Any more on waste management before we move on? All right. This energy efficiency for single-family residential is not fully second tier. Other than that, it was a primary focus, and now it's not so much. We've already spoken about it. Transportation, as it relates to greenhouse gas reductions and potentially quality of life issues, has had some attention, especially with our most recent car-free challenge and electric vehicle infrastructure upgrades. I don't know that it's being pushed harder either direction. It's nice to say we could make the traffic issues in Tacoma go away, but previous indicators are that it's a lot of cut-through traffic, that it's harder to manage even if we wanted to do it, unless we were trying to kind of push traffic to other roads. But it's around. Anyway, again, don't have much to say on this, on the lower tier ones.
Well, can I ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys look at autonomous cars with respect to transportation? Because I'm on the National League of Cities Transportation Infrastructure Service Committee, and there are a number of bills in Congress now that are going to make it much easier for companies to test autonomous cars. So it is coming, and it's coming quickly.
We have not addressed it.
Should you volunteer?
I'm trying. I'm trying. All right. But it's something you might want to consider.
Any other comments on transportation?
I guess I would just like to mention something. We're currently, I guess there's a county's doing their dockless bike share process, and we'll hear some information at some point on how their pilot's going. But one of the things that I'm looking at is ways that we can use some of our asphalt of our streets as parking corrals for dockless bikes. So it's a way to continue to encourage people to use these bikes, but not necessarily have them in the middle of sidewalks, on people's lawns, or on handicap ramps. And so parking spaces, that kind of thing that could function as a location for bikes is something I'm looking at to try to encourage the fewer use of cars.
If there's no more on transportation, we'll move along. I want to comment that the next two items say integrated natural resources, and on a previous Green Team meeting, we loved that term and maybe overused it. Our last Committee on the Environment meeting, or a recent one, we decided to, or it was suggested that we maybe stop using it, or not lean on it as a catch-all that would integrate so many things. So a potential more editorial change could be to move those off this list. And then in terms of the topic itself, stormwater, as Daryl said, it's going very strongly and is mandated and is funded and keeps getting updated and refined as we get closer to whatever deadlines the mandates carry with them. So as the committee has not addressed it as, while it's important and actions are already happening on it, it's not something that we're trying to do more on or push harder. Any comments there? I guess we've heard enough on that one. On stormwater, yes.
Can I just say something, which is both Councilmember Kovar and I are interested in something that Darryl referred to earlier, which is whether we can justify developing incentives for stormwater actions on private property, either singly, individually, or together, a group of residents. It's something I would like to personally work on, depending on the results of the numbers. Just put that out there. Because I'm at the bottom of the hill. No, just.
So, moving on to water quality. As a committee, we've thought this is too low on the list. And for a while, we've been talking about the Brett Shears Run watershed, and which, as Paul says, encompasses over 50% of Tacoma Park, kind of drains into this area and then comes out into Sligo Creek down by Maple Avenue and the Parkway. And there's a mystery there to explore, and we've proposed some pilot studies and received some small go-ahead funding from the council in the past. It requires more attention in order to make some progress on it, and potentially a follow-up study with a little bit more funding, and of course coordination upstream and with other partners both in the county and Friends of Sligo Creek. It also seemed to be something that could be more of a poster child type of project where it's something people can put their hands on. It's not far away greenhouse gas, climate change related. It's, can I play in the creek today kind of questions. And council member Tim Mayle, previously former council member, got it onto this list, I think at our previous meeting, and it hasn't gone too far, and there's proposals to bring this up. So that's on the list of maybe vote to change that.
And do you have a budget number? Or how much more money?
Roughly, we've talked previously about having a $5,000 initial pilot study project, which would involve some volunteer managers and a bunch of water quality testing. And then based on that, escalating up to a $25,000 follow-up study, and all pending what can be discerned about what's happening, where sources of pollution are coming from, and potentially some solutions after that. And then I think who knows what beyond that is any kind of implementation, or I don't know if it's coordinating with the stormwater plans, or there's probably a whole bunch of different interventions or implementation ideas, but it's very much a mystery and a study at this point.
Okay.
So would you see if this was moved up $5,000 in this year's budget, and then see what that brought, and then come back to see what? Probably
no. We try to cash in on the $5,000 approved as an executive amount earlier.
So this was discussed 2 years ago, or at least a year ago, and then somehow it never came to pass. And then there have been requests like, well, do we have that $5,000 to do this? And I have the authority to do that. I have asked for a description of what is needed to be done so that I could see if that's the right amount and if it makes sense. And so I've not received that yet. Okay. I still think that, depending on what I see in the scope, I think I could find the $5,000. Yeah. It's just is that something that we can do, and is that appropriate for this? I am also very interested in knowing kind of what that follow-up study would be, and so I need more information. I've only received inquiries and not a lot of information. Okay.
Thank you.
So as a kind of proposed timeline schedule, it's trying to work with the initial $5,000 sooner than later, and maybe proposing in this year's budget, the budget for the coming year, the follow-up, which would be dependent on the first one, but could be sketched out at least a little better so we can feel like a solid budget item, combined with Paul, who's being our ringleader on it, not being involved soon, makes a little bit of a conundrum. We haven't had someone on the committee beyond Marty who is doing at least a little bit of fill-in, but I'm not sure it's a long-term commitment to own this project. That would so we're it's a question about can we have a desire to elevate it, but maybe not the personnel or the funding to make sure something happens.
Yeah, if I may interject, I think, Suzanne, one of the reasons why you haven't seen the details is I know Marty has been working very hard on pulling things together, and as Sajivan mentioned, it's really a matter of we have to leverage a lot of different resources here. The amounts of money that we're talking about are not nearly sufficient to pull this kind of a project off. But if we can leverage a lot of existing resources, which include the Friends of Sligo Creek and my volunteer labor, for example, and some others with some contacts that I have, we can probably pull this thing off. But it's a matter of pulling it together, and Marty has been working on that. We've been talking. I know that there was a meeting with Darrell, and there's been a lot of discussion, but we haven't quite got down to this thing of refining what the roles are going to be. I fully intend to stay involved as a member of Friends of Sligo Creek, if not on the Committee on the Environment, because this, of course, is what I got my doctorate in, so I could probably help a little bit on this. But I fully intend to be involved, and Friends of Sligo Creek are firmly committed to pursuing this as an entity. So, I think something's going to be forthcoming fairly soon. I know Marty's busy on some other things, but...
Marty's very committed to making this happen. I just want to get something that's coherent for you, Suzanne. And we've had a phone call with Daryl, and we've already figured out there's been some duplication of efforts between Friends of Sligo Creek and the City of Tacoma Park. So I see my role as connecting the dots, and I also see Brashears Run as an opportunity because it's our tributary in Tacoma Park, and most residents don't even know that it exists. And we're actually, sitting on top of it right now. And many of the outfalls and stormwater drain things on the street drain into Brashears Run, so I have a lot of ideas about an outreach program to make sure that residents know about Brashears. And it's also a source of illicit discharges, chronic illicit discharges, so we know that this is a place where pollution comes into Sligo Creek, and we own it. So I am passionate about making something happen there. And if you go and walk down, I challenge every one of you to go walk down behind Essex House apartments buildings and look down in there. It is a mess. It's a mess. It's been a mess for as long as I've lived here, and I would love to see some stream restoration. I'd love to see the trash out of there. There's ducks, little wood ducks that like to hang out there, and it breaks my heart to see them down there with the green water and the trash and all that. So I'm going to be bird dogging this one.
And I just wanted to add, we had what I thought was a really helpful phone conference with folks that Marty put together. We can really envision this as kind of a pilot project that could be replicated well outside the city, everywhere, if you get all the various pieces working together. So there's definitely a lot of cohesiveness between her vision and what we're doing and what other resources can bring to bear on it.
If there's no more to discuss there, I want to try to move a little faster because we're running out of time. Open space. There was a lot of energy on this project, both from former staff member Erkin Nosberg and former committee member Lauren. Oh, for her last name, Lauren, and it has just fallen by the wayside. Two primary movers stopped working on it, and as a environmental issue, I think it's pretty top. It can have a big impact, and as a city priority around livable communities, it could also have a much larger impact, especially when one looks at kind of the social justice aspects of, we've got it, like the tree canopy, we kind of got it in pockets and don't have it in other places. We're not proposing to bring it up, as we don't think we don't hear that we have staff capacity or committee capacity to bring it up, but it may be one to consider.
There is funding in the CIP, I think next year and a couple of years out, for an open space plan overseen by the planning office.
Right, and this is something that we brought up before, that we probably need at least another position in planning.
Right. So can you just say, so for the people who are new here, the plan was essentially started?
The plan started.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good work, and I think it's a really important thing to have done for us as a community. But putting it into a coherent document to come to council, that's a ways off because we've been short-staffed.
The last item written here is, I think, a bit of a catch-all, but it's asking us to just ask ourselves questions: what is the impact on the environment of things we're doing, or is there an opportunity to coordinate something together at the same time? I think the open space kind of has that natural fit there in terms of looking at some of the community sustainability and human livability issues that would coordinate with a stronger environmental or cleaner environmental experience in Tacoma.
And on that one, the item that is the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan, and the point that the council has put in your priorities to really look at the environmental impacts and aspects of that, is something that has been specifically called out for this this draft priorities document.
Great. And I guess I would ask the Committee on the Environment, do you want to add here for consideration setting greenhouse gas target reduction, target number for greenhouse gas reduction for our consideration?
It felt like earlier that Gina had acknowledged that we might be overdue for the Sustainable Energy Action Plan update, and that it would be part of that, which I would subsume under the energy efficiency and renewable energy priorities.
Okay.
It's a specific action item. I did hear that. It didn't sound like a different priority. It just sounded like make sure it happens underneath one of the existing ones. The new one that I'll repeat now is Paul's point about development projects.
That was the next one I had on my list. Yep. Yes.
So we have the transportation and carbon emissions reduction as a second-tier priority. And I don't know if we could sort of shift it around so that we're looking at carbon emissions reduction as a first-tier priority that includes many ways of arriving at that, which is the goal.
You don't hold your button all the time.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I broke it. So the goal is carbon emissions reduction. And if these other ways of arriving at it, so why isn't that could we look at that as a first-tier priority, and then that could include waste management, that would obviously include energy efficiency, thank you, and renewable energy. Is that something that we could shift around? So it would include, things that we might have yet to come up with also to arrive at that final goal.
Mm-hmm. I might venture to clarify that second part of that phrase there was probably to focus the transportation efforts on carbon emissions reductions.
Right.
It's not really meant to be two in one. It's that let's look at transportation specifically in the greenhouse gas context, as opposed to a livability context or a walkability.
Right.
Even though, of course, they're totally integrated as an integrated natural resource, maybe. That could be a proposal as well.
Yeah, I guess the question is to look at carbon emissions reduction as the overarching goal and something that could include many actions to arrive at that goal.
Great. Yeah, John.
Yeah, and another specific. I like to think in terms of goal-oriented. It may be a goal would be to get half of Tacoma Park to sign up for wind power, both as a way to really motivate our town. I think we need, motivational goals to engage people and to commit ourselves so that we can measure our progress, and if we don't make it, keep going until we do.
Mm-hmm. So are you suggesting having that under the energy efficiency or as a separate standalone priority?
Yeah, under energy
sure.
efficiency. Yeah.
Renewable.
I'm sorry, renewable. Yeah.
One of the problems with a goal, and I'm a big fan of goals, but when we initially embarked on this enterprise with the first audit that we had, what the Brendel Group came up with was the startling conclusion that we have some of the lowest greenhouse gas emissions per capita of anybody in the United States. And this is not a great incentive for people to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Because, in fact, I had one of my neighbors say to me, well, we're already doing so well. Why do we need to do anything more? But, your idea of having substance-oriented goals rather than numerical goals might help with that, like getting half the people signed up to a renewable energy source or getting rid of half of gasoline-powered cars, things like that. And that way we wouldn't be dealing with these numbers of how many pounds per day CO2 equivalent somebody is emitting.
When I'm looking at what we're talking about, we're setting priorities. So there aren't discrete goals in the priorities. It's a priority area, and the discrete goals are sort of separate from the priority tiers.
Right. So I'm going to review what I've heard so far. So the first tier priorities were energy efficiency, and then just as a kind of a note underneath that, putting the setting of greenhouse gas target reduction, as Gina talked about, that is something that's already sort of planned out in the thinking of looking at the sustainability report again, or strategies. The next is renewable energy and the urban tree canopy. Moving down to the second tier priority is what we have now, waste management. We had some interesting ideas of exploring further some future things we could do, strategies on waste management, energy efficiency, transportation and carbon emissions reduction. And we had the idea of actually pulling out the carbon emissions reduction as an overarching goal. Then we had stormwater, water quality, and the conversation we had regarding how to start that work. Open space, the environmental aspects, and the integrating our environmental goals with other priorities that we have in the city. And then the other one we added was environmental impact during development projects. So I think we could spend maybe the next 10 or 15 minutes. I know we're going to go a little over tonight. The way we did this the last time that I thought worked, but Saji, tell me if other people disagree on the Committee of the Environment, is we sort of we discussed and then did a hand count, and then the Committee on the Environment, you all went back, looked at it one more time, and then brought it back to the City Council, and we adopted it by resolution. So we can change our minds, I guess is what I'm saying, after tonight's conversation, if after we think about what we want to set as the first tier, second tier, and third tier priorities before the council adopts these in a resolution. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So I think one of the ways to structure this conversation, I want to go back to pulling out the carbon emissions reduction as an overarching goal, since that's a big thing to do, and see if we could spend a few minutes on how people are feeling about that. And think about that. Any? Councilmember DeVallo?
Yeah, I know I'm supposed to say I want to set carbon emissions goals. But the last time I looked at this with Peter when we did the renewables resolution, we ran into it again, which is that there's a whole bunch of different percentages that are out there. Most of them don't have a lot of backup that would show how they got these numbers. And I actually am more comfortable with these are the steps we're taking, and one of the steps would be this year to look at the renewing the Sustainable Energy Action Plan, do it that way. Look at what's possible and practical and where that gets us carbon emission wise rather than the other way around. That's how I'm feeling about it right now.
Yeah, it's something to think about. You know, we're really doing very well on the energy aspects of greenhouse gases. And that's really thanks to Gina and all the resources the city has poured into this. And we're going to be continuing to do that. But I think we need to look at some of the other sources of greenhouse gases. And I hate to be controversial. You who know me, I know I'm never like that. But I think we have to recognize that I would bet in Tacoma Park that eating meat and dairy products is responsible for more greenhouse gases than use of energy in single-family homes, for example. So I think if we really want to tackle this subject, we need to do it honestly in a holistic fashion.
Unfortunately,
getting some support from over there.
Unfortunately, meat eating is not included in the community protocol for greenhouse gas accounting, as much as I wish it was as a 25-year vegetarian. I think setting a goal for greenhouse gas emissions, on one hand, is great. We need a goal, and having a goal gives us a mission, and a strong mission drives action. However, when I look at communities that have set goals recently, such as 100% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, people are left saying, well, how are we going to do that? Are we going to invest billions of dollars in removing the natural gas infrastructure of the city? I mean, there are extreme limitations on what we can achieve. So if we do set a goal, it will have to be unique and it'll have to be our own and not just jumping onto what's been set by other jurisdictions around us, I think.
Any other thoughts on? Do you want to speak more? I took your suggestion slightly differently. So, because I took it as sort of a rethinking on some of these priorities and pulling out carbon emissions reduction and not necessarily setting specific goals, but rather reconceptualizing the priority and then what goes underneath that. That's what I heard you say. Yeah.
What you said was helpful, and I think my concern was that it would be that you would be limiting discussion over the next year or before the next time we update this on other things that we haven't thought of yet, other creative ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which is the ultimate goal. So if we're limiting ourselves to these things that we're already doing well, and we're already discussing a lot, are there other things we could be doing that would be even more powerful to achieve that end goal? And I just wanted to make sure there was a way to talk about those things, or if they're just going to be dismissed because they're not a priority. Yeah.
I think one reason some of these were originally drawn out was to provide some focus so that the category is not too broad, since we can't do everything all at once. I think it is good to look at it in terms of carbon emissions overall. I do like that, but I think that was why originally it was done this way.
And I just say, thinking about it tonight, I like that idea of reconceptualizing this, and I think it's one that if the committee considers it, and as you all are reviewing this, and can come back to us with a recommendation, that would be great. Let's see. So let's take it on the first tier priorities. Putting a pin in the conversation we just had. Is there anyone who would like to put forward changing the first tier priorities, the 3 items we have now, areas, the 3 buckets we have now?
I saw Paul's.
Good.
I just really don't see why we're separating our single-family residential from other structures here. If we do something like implement the, buying 100% wind power, that could benefit anybody. So I would merge that with the energy efficiency single-family residential category with the other, and just make it one category on energy efficiency.
I was just curious why it says Paul C. Suggests moving it down.
No, we took that out.
That was on the urban tree canopy, and the reason I suggested it because Darrell already has it firmly in hand, and I didn't think it needed to be a high priority of focus of either the council or the committee. Unless she slips off the rails, then of course we'll ask Darrell to come back and explain it. But it seemed like it was already working.
Yeah.
Just because it is a high priority doesn't mean it shouldn't remain there.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think given the timeline that Darrell has outlined, it would probably be a good idea. I would recommend that we keep it as a top tier priority. And the amount of time it's going to take for council and staff and the committee on the environment to work on this in the next year.
And the tree commission.
And the tree commission, yes.
Can I ask if the tree commission has any comments on any of this? I know
You will-
we've been out of the table here, but. Come up to a mic.
Yeah, you have to do a microphone.
Yeah, on the different priorities. I didn't mean to take.
That's
take
fine.
Well, I guess I'm not prepared to talk about the priorities in general, but yes, I'm definitely in favor of keeping the urban tree canopy as a top priority. And I do expect that the Tree Commission will have a lot of input in discussion both of revising the tree ordinance and on on the numerous proposals for expanding the tree canopy, both on private property and on public property. So, yeah, so.
Great. And Gina, I don't know if you wanted to speak at all to I can't remember why we broke it out a year or two ago, of putting it back together, the energy efficiency.
It's the same comment from before. It's to provide focus area. So with the energy efficiency, we've done an incredible amount with single family, and there was the desire to focus more on multifamily and commercial energy efficiency in that year.
Okay. All right. Moving down, I think the other area, I don't mean to skip anything, but I think the other area that we discussed was the possibility of moving water quality up. Any thoughts on that? I will say that I think it should be higher than the third tier priority, and explore what Marty's putting together and what can get done with possibly a $5,000 budget and more. But from my perspective, until it's flushed out more, I'm not sure I would move it to a first tier priority, given the other priorities we've discussed this evening. So,
If I could just do a quick thing about the energy efficiency.
Okay.
Perhaps the thing to do on the first tier priority, put energy efficiency and then in parentheses, especially multifamily and commercial, and then you can just take out the single family residential out of the second, because it would be incorporated. So that may make things just feel a little bit easier as you're talking about where water quality goes.
And then you opened up a space for water quality. Put it up there.
Yeah, so with respect to water quality, I'm actually really glad that you're just recommending that be moved up, because I think that is a good idea, at least a second tier priority. And this actually brings up an issue that I would like to mention, and that is the oversalting of roads in the wintertime. And that has a direct effect on trees. I believe that several of my trees or shrubs have been killed by oversalting. Of course, I can't prove that, but there seems to be a strong correlation. And I've also seen reports that indicate that national waterways are becoming saltier. And this is a direct result of road salt. So I do think that this is an issue that we should consider with respect to water quality. So just wanted to put that out. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Was there anything else that we needed, you felt like we needed to discuss to reflect? Anyone want to make any other comments regarding what would be in a second or a third tier? Yeah, nothing.
I think having the development projects goal explicitly put somewhere on this list has been suggested and endorsed. I'm not sure if we're proposing bumping it right into second tier or something, or even first tier, given the timeline. But somewhere.
And by that, you mean the impacts of development and construction rather than building in LEED or
Right.
some other equivalent, which is a very important thing also, but is different. Okay.
That's right, Cindy. You know, the NDC, the developer of the junction, has already committed to LEED Gold, and we've actually individually pushing him to do even more. When Montgomery College does their project, that will likely be a gold project. Montgomery College is also committed to green building. And then, of course, we don't know what's going to happen with Adventist Hospital. I guess we can plan for the worst, but I think we would assume that anything that were to be built on that campus site would also meet green building specifications that are in effect at that time. So this is really the process of the construction, demolition of existing facilities, construction of new ones, until the building is up and operating.
I'm thinking about the impacts of the Purple Line, and I'm thinking about New Hampshire Avenue, and not just Montgomery College.
Yeah, most of the kinds of things about impacts during construction are part of codes.
Right.
So a lot of this is code enforcement, and whether it's impact on water quality from runoff during construction, dust, noise, light, working hours, all of those kinds of things are covered by codes. I have a feeling there will be many people watching these things very, very closely too, so we'll hear about any violation right away. But I think, it is absolutely a concern because things can happen during construction, and you do have to watch. I particularly would be interested on the water quality issues about the hospital site, with it being right over the creek. So that's something that, to me, would require a lot of attention.
Did you want to say anything?
Only just that maybe is the place to start, is what is already in code, and is that going to cover most of what people are thinking about? Maybe that's the way to frame up.
Yeah, I think that probably is. The issues with Montgomery College, which I can speak personally to, for example, one big one was the use of diesel generators. That isn't covered by any code. It's an air pollution. It's a greenhouse gas issue. Are there alternatives that we could encourage them to use, such as a natural gas-powered source or solar-powered source for construction power, things like that? So that's the type of thing that comes to mind. But I agree, if it's something that's already covered by code, and, for example, I know that all these entities will have to have an urban forest management plan that our city will approve. I don't think we need to worry about that any further. There's plenty of opportunities for input on that and for working on that.
Well, maybe that's one that the committee can talk about, because I think that would be one that the council would ask the committee to look at what, in addition to, is already required in code, like the diesel engines that might be able to be explored with, that alternatives could be explored. So it depends also on the capacity of the committee to take on that work and assist us in identifying some of those examples like Paul just gave.
Sounds like a homework item.
I think it does.
But do we even have like a target of second or third tier or anything? Can we put a proposal on that? Okay.
All right. Anything else? How's the committee feeling? Enough direction from council? Need input on any other areas? And we're not going away, so it's not like you can't come back to us.
Can I just make a comment? I would just encourage you, as you're working, to maybe look for opportunities to work with other city committees as well. As we've been talking, I noticed a couple of places there could be crossover. One is the Tree Commission, as we talked about, but also the Recreation Department or the Recreation Committee, as you're looking at open spaces. I think the Safe Roadways Committee is a little bit in limbo right now and doesn't have a lot of members, but as that potentially grows a little bit, that could be a place you could look at for collaboration related to transportation and emissions reductions related to that. So that might be a way to sort of collaborate and work together and also lighten your load a little bit as well, your workload. So I just encourage that.
And the Youth Council. So they're awesome, and and meeting with them as they're looking at, they just, I think they're finishing up their survey and looking at some of the things that they're going to be undertaking over the next year or so. So there may be some overlap with them as well. Yeah.
So are we going to talk to them about population growth and procreation or something?
Good. All right, well, I think if the committee feels like you've gotten enough direction to take this to the next place, then I think we're a little over. But any other thoughts or?
One
Yes,
thing.
go ahead, Helen.
We had some back and forth about the about socially. It just went on.
Use balls, Mike.
Yeah.
I don't know. About socially responsible investing, and I know that there's a lot going on already, and the city is really systematically investigating this area. And I just want to make sure that we can have input in the most useful way and notice of anything that's coming up. And we'll certainly keep track of when it's being discussed at council meetings and all, but we're very happy to provide input in any way that the council would find useful.
Great, thank you. We appreciate that. Good. All right. Sachin, do you have anything else, or are we good?
I was just trying to look at the bullet points at the top. It said identify specific areas in which committee can assist the city council, or this second one about identifying 2 to 3 specific shared areas for joint action. I don't know, we've addressed them too much directly, but as I said before, I think the committee responds to the council, responds to citizens, and does self-initiated stuff, following our guidelines and our priorities. But I don't know if there's anything to say over there.
Yeah. Well, I would just say that I think, and I'm not sure how much, I know we sent to you all last year, not as much this year, but when bills were coming up in Annapolis to get your feedback. Last year you reviewed, I know, quite a few, and it was very helpful in giving direction to council. I think this year there's been fewer just because a lot of them, some of them are repeats from last year, so we already know what to do. I think in future years that might be different with different people in Annapolis after the elections. So I would just like to point out that I think that is one area where the committee has been very helpful very quickly helpful in that. I don't know if other. And I think the socially responsible banking and investing is definitely an area we'll come back to you all on. The tree canopy, the tree ordinance, I see that as a kind of a three-way, that sounds odd, the kind of it's getting late, a working together between the council, the Committee on the Environment, and the Tree Commission, really working hand in hand on that as we move it forward. And we had a lot of council discussion during our priority retreats, thanks to Councilmember Dabala, in really thinking about how we're making sure that as we're setting the tree canopy goals and looking at the tree ordinance, that these are things that are working together and not against one another. And so that will, as you pointed out, that will require a great deal of work. And so I'm sure we'll be coming back to you all on that. So, did I miss anything else?
As Cindy brought up with the Purple Line as another development project, and I know there's been some interest in some county council people in the fact that there's an equity issue here, that the Purple Line could be causing gentrification and basically making housing unaffordable up there. I think it might be part of what we do or what the committee does in the city to ensure that there's not a matter of environmental equity associated with the Purple Line construction also. I think it behooves us to be sensitive to environmental equity with everything the city does, because sometimes these things are hidden and we don't really see them. But that certainly is something that presents itself right away. Is there going to be an unequal impact on people living near Purple Line construction because of environmental impacts of the construction?
If I can just mention one of the things, certainly with the Economic Development and Housing Strategic Plan, there's a lot of discussion about the impact on housing related to the Purple Line. One of the things that has been a topic of the council for quite some time is that as new construction for housing takes effect, obviously we'll try to have affordable housing, but part of the way it's affordable is if the energy costs are low. And so that's also something that we look at to make sure that we're not having displacement and that kind of thing, that we maintain stable neighborhoods throughout our community. And part of that is to have the energy efficiency that's needed, that's built in. So I look forward to, as we get closer to the details on that, making sure we wrap it together very carefully.
Cool. All right. So we'll wait for you all to recontact us and get this. We'll set a time at a council meeting, and we may do a work session first and then a resolution.
And then we'll try to have another meeting in the fall.
Yes, and so we have the meetings in the ideal time is having the meetings in the fall, so that way, and ideally, in my ideal world, the city council would be meeting with each of our committees more in the fall, so that we are then doing council priorities in January and then setting our budget in the spring. That's my ideal world.
Your agenda.
I know.
Are the elections every 2 years?
Next time is going to be 3 years. So
Okay,
the next
but-
election is 2020. So we may be able to get this kind of.
I don't know if Jesse can work the magic of scheduling all those committee
I know it's
planning
hard.
meetings in December.
Yes,
so
that
that
is
they
the
don't
problem.
shift around every election year.
The council doesn't mind meeting 3-4 nights a week.
Yes.
Their problem.
Seems to be that way.
It seems to be that way lately. It does. Anyway, thank you all. And I should have actually started this meeting by saying thank you so much for your service on this committee. We value the Committee on the Environment's feedback and this partnership as a Green Team very much. And we know all the hard work that goes into all this. The expertise that you all bring to this work is invaluable to us, and I know to the partnership you have with our city staff. So thank you all very much, and have a good evening.